I'd now like to introduce this evening's topic, what really affects my quality of life. A mainstay of the Australian media for over 20 years, our next speaker has been awarded 2 Penguin Awards and a United Nations Media Peace Prize. In 2000, she was awarded a Churchill Fellowship for Social and Cultural Reporting, and in 2003, she was recognised with an Officer in the Order of Australia for services to the community and media, and her prime work responsibilities are now presenter of 2 ABC programmes, Saturday Extra on Radio National and Compass for ABC One. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to stage Geraldine Doogue.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Eddie, and Gabby before him. And it's lovely to be here. I honestly, as I was driving up, wending my way through the traffic, just sort of, I thought none of them will come. It's such a terrible night. So I'm really thrilled. Thank you very much indeed for coming in such numbers. It's terrific to see. And when I was posed this question, I thought to myself, well, I was at a forum some years back, that it was quite a few years actually now, that asked exactly the same question: what really affects quality of life in communities? And 2 answers stuck with me when I was thinking about talking to you tonight. In searching for a better quality of life, one particular man said, because I went and looked at my notes, Australians yearn for the facilities of the city but the values of the country, but in reality they get exactly the reverse. And second, that part of the sense of belonging to a community was that you could rely on accidental contact with people, that you didn't have to have executive assistants to sort of coordinate diaries. That actually didn't make for a community, and that you routinely bumped into people accidentally that you liked and disliked. This was one of those great little insights from this forum, that that was part of the security bargain. It wasn't all lovey-dovey. In fact, part of the security was that you knew that Mr. So-and-so was a pest, and that was all part of it. So I've never forgotten that piece of wisdom, because I think it's quite practical, and if you think about it, it rings true. And a place like Gosford, of course, where you straddle both city and country, maybe you feel that you've happened upon all these gems, and that's why you're here. You've made a very conscious choice, and that's why you're here tonight. That you effectively want to acknowledge that the Gosford Talks do assist the sorts of decisions you've made and want to commit to further, and maybe I'll find that out when we open it up for discussion. But I've personally never stopped being challenged by all this, and I'm lucky, I think, anyway, because I keep getting to do interviews with all sorts of people who are really right at the cutting edge of trying to think about a lot of this, because this is happening all around the Western world. People are gathering more or less in forums like this, if they're lucky, if they've got community organisations that organise them, but they're thinking about it. And just on Saturday morning, I met one of the best and brightest minds in the UK, a man who played a big role in the Blair government, Dr. Jeff Mulgan. And he's, rather than being a sort of social policy planner at Whitehall, which is where he was, he's actually joined something called the Young Foundation. They have all sorts of trusts over there, very well funded, I might add. This is a very eminent one, where they really get their hands dirty. They do lots of pilot projects in communities. And they have been dreaming up things like the Big Lunch, where all across the UK, people are encouraged, I think it's in about its 3rd year now I might stand corrected, but encouraged to effectively, with help, routinely bring people out in their streets and their roads to have a big lunch with each other. It's sort of a simple little idea, but it's really catching on. He also told me about another area where they were, for instance, they had a community website that they introduced via the internet, where they invited everybody to use it as a clearinghouse, to post all sorts of activities, and it had just exploded in the area as people suddenly became aware of what was on offer and who were the active people, and it sort of brought out the best in them as well. And last night on ABC Radio, I was listening to the veteran market researcher Hugh Mackay speak about his new book, and he said he'd decided, having waded through masses of research here and elsewhere, more or less around this topic of quality of life, that one plea kept coming from people constantly and consistently, and that was, please take me seriously, which is about human dignity. Now, he said it was from all manner of people, that this, if he had to distill it, and he's a very fine market researcher, this is what he felt it distilled down to. Please take me seriously. And he said, some people did it in a most ridiculous fashion. Even if they were sort of throwing bombs or making trouble, they could persuade themselves that they were being taken seriously. Might end up in jail being taken seriously, but in this modern world, people often have this sense that they're just overlooked, that they don't matter. And he feels this has to be really prioritised and highlighted, which certainly worked for me because I have decided for quite a few years that I love that phrase of the great English novelist E.M. Forster, who wrote Howard's End and Room with a View and so on. Only connect, he wrote, somewhere towards the end of the 19th century, only connect. And I think connecting with this complex community of ours is the real mission at hand. That is really my conviction, if you ask me to consider what will affect my quality of life. I truly believe it is about connection, because we're all connecting these days in a virtual sense, which is terrific. But I'm going to invite you to, I'll talk about some of the research, the broader research on this, but I will invite you to go a little bit deeper yourselves into that intangible area of asking yourself, how much do I still connect? Because it's not asked these days nearly as much. It's quite a countercultural thing. As I read a bit of a wit the other day who said the modern idiom of the day is not really summarised by it's the freedom to be me. It's really, they suggested, the freedom to be left alone, which is a very different motive and sensibility, if you think about it. The freedom to be left alone. It might have some short-term attractions, being left alone, but it's not designed, I promise you, none of the research suggests it really improves your quality of life long-term, based on the best psychological knowledge. You know that great line of Paul Keating's? In any two-horse race, always back self-interest, at least you know it's trying. I'm going to suggest to you that connecting is in our self-interest. If we are interested in quality of life, connecting is in our self-interest. So I'm not just peddling, even though it is altruistic as well, but it is very much about self. I don't really make any apologies about that, but I think it is worth saying. And I think that there's a real challenge on for us all to rebut the great impersonal tendency in our midst and to model what it means to be truly personal in our dealings with each other and the world. Now, it's not exactly a glorious motto, just counter the impersonal or be personal. I know it doesn't have a sort of fabulous ringing endorsement or sort of ringing tone about it, such that, you think it puts you into the pantheon of heroes. But look, I'm pretty wary of some of those big claims. Reach for excellence, keep trying. I often think that they're very utopian. You can abide by them for about 4 days before you give up. And I'm much more interested in incremental change that you can achieve. And sometimes young journalists, women journalists in particular, come to me and they're not satisfied with something they're doing with their performance, whatever. And I say, just fiddle with your image 10%. 10 to 15% is a doable thing. Psychologically, it's very doable. You won't be completely reordering your entire personality, which you won't be able to maintain. You'll have energy left. You probably will stick with it. And I think that this business about working out how to counter the impersonal is really something worth dreaming about. I think it's very rich, I'd suggest to you. I sense that maybe we've fallen into the trap of stripping down a lot of our interpersonal contacts and deciding that sheer friendliness and grace can be sidelined or kept for the very few in our life. You know, we might even, that we can do it without much downside, that in the noisy hurly-burly of trying to keep up, and I'm for keeping up, very much so, as you'll hear, but that in effect we've got to really pull back to a very few, little Praetorian guard around ourselves. And we might even persuade ourselves that this is a sort of noble thing to do, and I can even understand that, because it's tricky. We do need hierarchies of relationships. I think we all know that. In the type of world we live in now, and very busy lives, we shouldn't whip ourselves completely into a lather over falling into a sort of what I'd call a natural reserve with people who merely cross our paths, given that a lot more of us are in the service industries these days, where we are required to be with people. You know, offices are just such extraordinarily busy places these days. You pray for a bit of solitude in a modern office. And I don't think we're required to display the same type of commitment to casual encounters as we are with intimates. In fact, if we do that, you know, it can introduce a sort of slightly bogus element. I've seen that, where people sort of have this great style, which you think, well, how can they keep that up? What's that all about? So, but the point is to guard against indifference and callousness. That's my way of trying to think it through anyway, that can creep up very easily on good, busy people. And before you know where you are, particularly, dare I say, for the mothers in this little auditorium, who you can persuade yourself that no one fully understands exactly how much you're giving to your entire family, and that you're sort of a complete sort of case study in generosity of spirit, as you say it with gritted teeth, becoming just a little bit callous maybe, a little bit indifferent. I mean, I think all of us need to just question ourselves about this.